Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This forum will be featuring the two candidates seeking the position of judge on the 51st District Court. Sponsors of this forum are the Oakland County Bar Association, the Detroit Free Press, and the League of Women Voters Oakland area. I am Jerry Burden, a member of the League of Women Voters of Oakland area and impartial non-resident of the 51st District. The League of Women Voters is a trusted, nonpartisan political organization. Our members do the hands-on work to safeguard democracy. We are directly involved in shaping the important issues to keep our community strong. If you're interested in learning how you can be a member and help us with our mission, I would encourage you to pick up some of the League's information available here tonight or on our website, lwvoa.org. The League of Women Voters do not endorse any candidate or political party. The Oakland County Bar Association will not be endorsing any candidates. The Detroit Free Press may endorse candidate after the forum. Views expressed at this forum are those of the candidates, and the League takes no responsibility. The information for this forum has been established by the League. The candidates will be answering questions from our panel, Karen H. Safran of the Oakland County Bar Association, Brian Dickerson of the Detroit Free Press. They will also be answering audience questions submitted by the audience and screened for duplication and relevancy by Lisa Stagig Elliott of the Oakland County Bar Association. We ask that the audience remain silent during the forum. Please turn off all cell phones and any electronic devices, and no picture taking is permitted other than by the press. Before we begin our candidates' opening statements, I would like to introduce Judith Cunningham, President of the Oakland County Bar Association, who will be giving some pointers on how to judge these candidates. Judith.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Judith Cunningham, and I have the privilege of serving as President of the Oakland County Bar Association this year. You're about to see two candidates tell you why they believe they would serve you and your fellow citizens well as a district court judge for the 51st District Court serving the Township of Waterford. Now, when we view sports games, we know that a referee who doesn't know the game or favors one side can spoil the contest. A judge is asked every day to make important decisions, apply the law, and act as society's referee. If the judge is biased, incompetent, or intemperate, everybody loses. In November, you'll be asked to make an important decision. Among the least understood elections are judicial elections. Therefore, the Oakland County Bar Association, and as you know, in collaboration and partnership with the League of Women Voters and the Detroit Free Press, has established these judicial candidate forums to help you make the important selection of the appropriate judges, a decision that could affect you and your family for years to come. The American Bar Association, a national association of lawyers that has advised American presidents for over 50 years on the selection of judges, has outlined 8 factors to consider in selecting good, honest, competent, and hardworking judges. We endorse these factors and recommend them for your consideration as well. The first one is integrity. Is the candidate honest and open? Has he or she led an exemplary life? And will he or she be an example to those whose cases he or she must decide? The second factor is legal knowledge and ability. Has the candidate demonstrate that he or she knows the law, either by good grades in law school, teaching at seminars, or simply demonstrating that he or she speaks and writes clearly and well? The third factor is professional experience. It's difficult to think of a judge who can competently hear disputes if the judge has not had much experience in the courtroom as a lawyer or other equivalent experience resolving disputes. The fourth factor is judicial temperament. Will the candidate be a judge who has a positive attitude, acts professionally, and treats all people with dignity and respect? And most important, is the candidate likely to remain impartial throughout all of the dispute resolution process. The fifth factor is diligence. Is the candidate likely to be a hard worker who efficiently manages a caseload and decides cases promptly and is always fully prepared? Sixth, what is the candidate's state of health? Is there anything about the candidate's physical or mental health that would interfere with his or her ability to complete an entire term or perform the duties of judge? The next factor is financial responsibility. Has the individual demonstrated prudence and responsibility in his or her own financial affairs? And finally, the last factor is the question of public service. Serving on the judiciary is the ultimate act of public service. Has the candidate demonstrated a worthiness to accept this awesome position of responsibility by showing leadership in other organizations that have benefited the community throughout his or her life? We strongly urge you to keep these factors in mind as you listen to the candidates speak this evening. And most important, remember to vote on the nonpartisan judicial ballot. Thank you for your time and attention and your interest in good government. And now back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. All candidates will be allowed equal time to answer each question. Our timer, Judy Bateman, will indicate when we have 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and when to stop. Our page, Kathy Maisner, will be passing around if you need questions. She has cards and pencil. Just hold your hand up. She'll pick up the questions and get them to our screeners. The candidates are Andrea Dean, the Honorable Jodi R. Debbrecht. We will begin with a 1-minute opening statement, and we'll start with Ms. Dean.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you, the Free Press, the Oakland County Bar Association, and the League of Women Voters. I think that judicial races are probably the least paid attention to in any type of a race, so I think it's very important for these type of events to occur so that the public can genuinely know what experience a candidate has and why they are running for this position. I am running for District Court Judge in Waterford Township for 3 main reasons. First of all, I believe the most basic fundamental right of any American is to be able to choose those who serve them. I believe the citizens of Waterford have that right, and that is the first reason why I am running. Secondly, I come to you with over a decade more experience than anyone in this race. I have been a practicing attorney for 18 years, 14 years of which I served as an Oakland County prosecutor, 4 years in private practice. I've handled cases in the appellate courts, including the Michigan Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. And most importantly, I'm running because I am genuinely committed to this community. I chose over 15 years ago, to move to Waterford, knowing that this is a place where I wanted to raise my family.
Thank you. Ms. Judge Debbrecht.
Good evening. I am Judge Jodi Debbrecht, and I too likewise want to thank the League of Women Voters, the Oakland County Bar Association, our panel members, and certainly those in attendance and those who are watching this program from your homes. As your judge, it has been my pleasure to serve our community. This is a responsibility that I do not take lightly. On the bench, each case is given equal importance and thoughtful consideration. Whether I'm deciding difficult criminal cases or upholding code ordinance standards or implementing an aggressive testing protocol for substances such as spice and K2, I'm guided by my desire to protect and make Waterford the best community for all of us to raise our children. My commitment to the community has not ended there. Off the bench, I'm holding town hall forums on spice and K2, introducing new programs to the high schools, raking leaves for the elderly. I could go on. As your judge, my goal, my responsibility is to make a difference on and off the bench, and it will be my privilege to continue serving you as your Waterford District Court Judge.
Thank you. We will now begin the question segment of our forum. Most questions will have a 1.5-minute time limit with a 30-second rebuttal, if necessary. We will begin the question and answer session with Brian Dickerson of the Detroit Free Press.
Okay, Mrs. Dean, I'm starting with.
Yes.
Mrs. Dean, your opponent, Judge Debbrecht, was appointed to the Waterford District Bench just less than 2 years ago. Her prior professional experience, her personal interests, and even her involvement with her church are startlingly similar to your own. It strikes me, looking at your cards, that if we were in one of those alphabetically organized homerooms, you'd probably sit right in front of her. What is it about her performance as district judge that impels you to run? Why should voters replace her, new as she is to the bench, with someone who has even less judicial experience?
Well, first of all, as I indicated, Mr. Dickerson, I think it's very important that the voters have a right to choose. I understand the appointment process. It can happen, it can occur. It's very rare, however, that an individual that's not living and committed to that community is chosen. It has happened, but it's very rare. I chose to move to Waterford. I knew 15 years ago this is where I wanted to participate in the community, be involved in my church, be involved with my children, to raise them. And I think the difference is also a tremendous work ethic that I carry with me. 8:30 to 4:30 is not a difficult thing to ask an individual to be into a courtroom, to be ready for litigants, to be ready for attorneys. I bring with me an incredible work experience and work ethic, and I will carry that over into the court. So I believe that, when you're handed something, sometimes you don't appreciate the responsibility you're given. When you work hard and you choose to be part of your community for no other reasons other than you want to be there and you care about how this community will thrive, I think that's what makes the difference. I chose to be here. I have an incredible amount of experience, and I have an incredible work ethic. I will absolutely be in the court when I'm supposed to and serve these individuals of the township. I would work for them.
Okay. Judge Debbrecht, I have a different question for you. What is missing from your own professional experience or training that would make you a more capable judge?
Honestly, I would appreciate some training, and one thing that I want to extend myself into is with regard to our veterans. If I'm reelected or if I'm elected for this position, I would like to open up a veterans court. We're going to see an influx of young men and women coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq and other areas with service to our country. Service that I'm very, very grateful for. So I'm going to extend myself into that, have a cooperative court. I've already spoken with Judge Costin and some judges from Oakland County, and I would like some specific training in that area. We see post-traumatic stress in our court all of the time, and unfortunately now I'm having to transfer those cases to a jurisdiction where a court has a veterans court, and that would be Judge McKenzie's court out in Novi, instead of keeping them here in Waterford, where the citizens of Waterford are invested, having been offended upon. So I would appreciate more training in that area. I will obtain more training in that area, and I have already started to extend myself in that dynamic, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, we will start with Judge Debbrecht, and it will be from Karen Saffron of the Bar Association.
I actually have the same question for both of you, so I guess it may give Ms. Dean a bit of an advantage to think of the answer. So,
Fine.
Judge, I apologize. Both of you filled out a very comprehensive questionnaire for the Bar Association, a lot of information, a lot of personal information on your background. What question was not asked? In other words, what do you wish you were able to tell us? What didn't you tell us that, what don't we know about you that you think we should?
There was an awful lot of information. It was a very comprehensive questionnaire, and one, that took a significant amount of time. I have a plethora of information to give, my work history, my work ethic is second to none. When we talk about going to work and being committed to work, my days start at 7 o'clock in the morning and some nights end at 10 as a judge. And so, there's a whole lot more to being a judge than just cases that you hear. There's conferencing, there's judicial activity. The canons support and enforce, and we are encouraged from the Supreme Court and the Judicial Code of Ethics to engage in judicial activities. And oftentimes those things don't take place within the walls of the courthouse. And So, an opportunity to explain, say, maybe your average day or a day in the life of Judge Jodi Debbrecht would have been appreciated, or a week in the life of Judge Jodi Debbrecht when, I have our high school students from all 3 different high schools that are coming in, and we're educating them, and I'm teaching them, and I'm implementing new programs into the high schools, programs that I'm going to be continuing for years to come, and we're working until 6 or 7 in the evening. And I'm, like I said, attending meetings some days at 7 o'clock in the morning, or I'm holding conferences in chambers, or I'm coming in on the weekends to read case files, things of that nature. I think that most people just simply don't know that being a judge is a lot more than just sitting on the bench.
Thank you. Ms. Dean?
I don't know if it would have been feasible in a questionnaire, but I think a really good start, if even possible, would be to talk to the judges that you've practiced in front of. Talk to victims that you've represented, or defendants, or any client. So I think that would enable people to get a really good feel and understanding of how an individual performs in court, if they're prepared, if they're well-versed in the law, what their demeanor's like. So I don't know if that could fit into a questionnaire, but I think that's a very good thing for the voters to understand. Talk to the people that you actually practice in front of and have represented through the years, and see what they think about your representation, your work ethic, your diligence. That would be on a professional side. I think on a personal side, I would have loved to talk about my kids, I guess. Or talk to my neighbors, things like that. Find out what you're like actually as a person in this community. The people that you attend church with, the people that you live next door to. So just coming here with that questionnaire, which was thorough, but I think a lot more goes into being able to be a good judge and a good servant of the community. So if there could have been more discussion with those in a professional basis and perhaps those on a personal level, I think that would have been very helpful to the voters.
Thank you. Next question will come from the audience, and we'll start with Ms. Dean. With budget problems as they are, how would you better use court time to get the most bang for the buck to keep cases moving and costs under control?
Well, I believe that the costs also with the court have to also be looked upon with the individuals, the attorneys, the litigants that come into that courtroom. I think it's very important for judges to be timely, to not delay decisions, to be present when you need to, and that saves not only the attorneys time and money, but also their clients, because many people are going through a lot of difficult times economically right now, and I see it in court on almost a daily basis, and I understand that time is very precious. So I think, first of all, being very diligent with your work, being timely as a judge is very important. In the court itself, traffic offenses have gone down with ticket writing. There's a lot of cutbacks that the court has had to make because of cutbacks to police departments and other areas. So I'm not sure if there's an easy fix to that right now, but I think just performing your job when you're supposed to perform it saves many people money, not just the court system, but the litigants, the attorneys, and all those involved.
Thank you. Judge Debbrecht.
Could you repeat the question again, please?
Certainly. With budget problems as they are, how would you better use court time to get the most bang for the buck to keep cases moving and costs under control?
Well, from day one, I have said that we must all do more with less. And that has certainly been something that I've begun to implement within the court. In the last 5 years, the Waterford District Court has seen a 62% decrease in our civil infractions. That makes a dramatic hit on the court budget and on the budget to the Waterford Township, because those funds, a good portion of those funds, go directly into the general revenue. In doing more, we must multitask. For example, I advocated for a reduction in magistrate time. So instead of just running my docket and doing my pretrials, I'm taking over magistrate duties. We had a magistrate 3 days a week. We now have a magistrate sometimes 1 day a week, sometimes only a half a day a week. And I have agreed to take on those extra duties. It's things like that that are gonna result in a cost savings here. Not only that, we increase and we establish more comprehensive collections program. Yet another thing that I did within the court, I ran a court previously. I was a court administrator. And over the last year, because of the implementation of our court collections program, we have collected $218,000 on a $4.7 million outstanding revenue in our court. And that's directly as a result of the programs that I have implemented. I'm doing more with less. Being a judge is not just about sitting on the bench. It's about working in your community. It's about working in your court. It's about creating a better Waterford.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Judge Debbrecht, and will be from Brian Dickerson.
Judge, although it wasn't disclosed on the completed questionnaire that I received from you, Right to Life of Michigan says it's endorsed your candidacy. Is that correct?
I just received their letter yesterday. I have been endorsed by Right to Life.
Right to Life is an organization that actively seeks to enact laws that would make abortions illegal or more difficult to obtain. What does a judge who's sworn to uphold the existing law have to do to convince Right to Life she's in their corner?
Well, I don't have the foggiest idea how I've been blessed by such a breadth of endorsements. But quite honestly, I'm endorsed from everyone from the UAW to AFSCME, the AFL-CIO, the Police Officers Association of Michigan, and now Right to Life. Just yesterday, I received their letter.
Did you have to fill out a questionnaire for them?
I did do an initial questionnaire, and I went to the initial interview with them. There was a subsequent questionnaire that I did not complete, and a subsequent interview, as I understand, that I also did not attend. Again, I'm blessed by the support there, and I think that it speaks to the broad range of support for my mission and my purpose and my performance as a judge. And, beyond that, I don't know what criterion. I certainly can't speak for what criterion Right to Life was looking for. But like all of the other endorsements, I'm grateful.
Okay. I have a different question for Mrs. Dean. Mrs. Dean, shortly after she was elected to succeed Dave Gorsica as Oakland County prosecutor, Jessica Cooper asked each of the county's assistant prosecutors to reapply for their jobs. Of the roughly 100 veteran attorneys in the office, you were one of just 9 not invited to return.
Correct.
What is your understanding of why you were not asked to return to an office you'd served for 9 or 10 years at that point?
Actually, I'd been at the prosecutor's office 14 years, hired under Dick Thompson, served through David Gorsica. And I believe there were 12, actually, not reappointed by Jessica Cooper. I was interviewed by her. I was not asked any questions about any specific case, other than the Wendrow case that we're obviously very familiar with. The only question I was asked of that was who issued the warrant on that case, and it was not myself, it was someone in the warrants division. I really could not tell you what her reasoning was. I didn't receive any explanation other than the letter was stated due to budgetary cuts.
Okay. They did not cut the size of the staff, did they?
That I do not know, Mr. Dickerson, for sure. I know they have had several new hires in the last 4 years, but I'm not sure initially how many were retained or actually hired in what time frame. I'm not sure of that information.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Ms. Dean, and that will be from Ms. Saffron.
Thank you. Again, I have the same question for both of you. So this time, Ms. Dean, you're at the disadvantage.
That's fine.
Again, in reviewing your questionnaires, I noted that both of you have very strong backgrounds, a great deal of experience in criminal prosecution. However, as you know, the district court is a court of general jurisdiction, and there's many civil matters that would come before the court. I was wondering, what would you do to help prepare yourself to handle matters with which you may not be familiar?
Well, I do have civil experience as well. I have been in private practice at least 4 years now. I have probate experience, which will not be handled in the district court. I also have family law experience, again, an issue that may not be specifically when it comes to the divorce case, be handled in a district court. But I also have no-fault experience in civil litigation in that area as well. So I'm not just pigeonholed into simply the criminal law. I believe I have a very well-rounded and a large breadth of information or experience, rather. I've been in the prosecution side, as I stated, for 14 years. I've practiced criminal defense. I practice civil. So I'm not afraid to jump into an area that I'm not very familiar with. I'm very good at research. I do a lot of research, even when I was a prosecutor. So I believe that my work ethic and my ability to research and find out any answers that I don't know will serve me well. But again, I'm not simply experienced in just criminal. I do have civil experience as well.
Same question, Judge?
Well, as you can see from my responses on the questionnaires, where I did practice in a civil hybrid type of situation as well, that also included some probate litigation and things of that nature. However, once you become a judge, we receive an excellent education from the State Court Administrator's Office. But quite honestly, I'm a tremendous study of the law. And it's like figuring out a puzzle, working out a pattern. And so, again, one of our responsibilities is to be diligent and thorough. And I spend quite a bit of time, and less now, but certainly in the first year or so, on evenings and weekends. Quite often, I take files home. I have great mentors. I likewise do research, LexisNexis, ALRs, things of that nature. And, I go through highlighters like crazy, if you want to know the truth, Ms. Saffron, because I want to get it done, I want to get it done right, and I want to get it done well. As one attorney who I just recently met passed me a note after his case was closed, that note said to me, "In my 50 years of practice, you're the best ever." And that was on a civil case, one that I was diligent, one that I worked hard on, one that I had the right response. So.
Thank you. The next question will be from the audience. And this one should have a very short answer. So when you finish this one, I'm going to ask you another one before we go to our panelists.
Very good.
And we'll start with Judge Debbrecht. How long have you lived in Waterford?
I have lived in Waterford 2 years, the end of October. I have lived in Oakland County for 10 years.
And Ms. Dean?
I have lived in Oakland County for 17 years and Waterford 15 years.
Thank you. Now, the meat question is, this is addressed to Judge Debbrecht, but both will get a chance to answer. You stated in your questionnaire you have hundreds and hundreds of trials to verdict. What exactly are you referring to, and how many jury or bench trials did you perform to verdict as a prosecutor?
As a prosecuting attorney, I wasn't able to go through their case network system to establish a definitive number of cases that I tried to verdict before a jury. However, I was a trial litigator. I was a felony litigator, and the courtroom was my home. It is something that I enjoyed, and I took on some of arguably the best attorneys in the state. And that I tried some high-profile cases. I probably did 5 to 7 jury trials annually for the years. Annually that in which I was a prosecuting attorney. But where it comes down to hundreds of cases is I also took over the juvenile, the terminations, the abuse and neglect cases, something I've been very, very passionate about. I've been a longtime advocate of children, and I wanted to do those. I wanted to do them well. I wanted to do them right. It was nothing for us to do trials, 2 and 3 trials a day, 5 days a week in that case. And often, extending, you would go from one trial in the morning to another trial in the afternoon. And in that, for years, I did a significant number of cases as a prosecuting attorney.
Thank you. Ms. Dean?
As an assistant prosecutor, I tried to verdict approximately 75 jury and bench trials. Most of those were jury, probably about 60 at least of those. The rest were jury trials. In private practice, I've handled in the last 5 years, as indicated in my questionnaire, approximately 7. So close to 80 to 90 jury and bench trials throughout my career in 15 years. And I was assigned in the warrants division, the district court division, the circuit court division, the parole appeal division, and I've handled literally thousands of cases just as an assistant prosecutor, hundreds of preliminary exams. So I was in the courtroom and still am on a nearly daily basis. Most of those were jury trials. In Oakland County, it's different than a lot of the surrounding counties. It was basically a no plea bargaining policy through Dick Thompson and Dave Gorsica. So most of the types of cases that I handled, many of them capital offenses, always went to trial. So I have a significant amount of jury and bench trial, mainly jury trial experience, probably 90% of those felony cases, and a good amount of those as well, capital offenses.
Thank you. Next question, we will start with Ms. Dean, and it will be from Mr. Dickerson.
Mrs. Dean, you were the principal prosecutor in two of the most controversial prosecutions brought by the previous Oakland County prosecutor.
Correct.
And I want to start by asking you about the Wendrow case.
Sure.
I'm getting to a succinct question, but
Okay.
please forgive a kind of windy preamble because I want viewers to understand what it is I'm talking about. The Wendrow case was the case in which the prosecutor charged two parents, Ty and Ian Wendrow, with the sexual molestation of their autistic teenage daughter who was unable to speak. The case against the parents, and you were the principal prosecutor,
Correct.
was based on statements the autistic victim was alleged to have made through a facilitator who steadied her hand as she used a computer keyboard. But the so-called facilitated communication on which the whole case rested turned out to have been scientifically debunked 10 years before. Your own expert witness testified in the preliminary exam that any statements rendered through a facilitator were utterly unreliable. And you were removed from the case, and it was reassigned to another prosecutor immediately afterwards. A month or so later, all the charges against both parents were dropped. And the police department that arrested them paid the parents $1.8 million to settle a civil lawsuit. You and your superiors escaped liability not because the court approved of your handling of the case, it didn't, but because the court ruled that prosecutors enjoyed governmental immunity from any civil litigation. I go through all of this, and I apologize for the length of the preface, because I was startled to read in sworn testimony you gave during a civil lawsuit years after the case had been dropped, the following statement, and I quote, "I would do this case again in a heartbeat, and I think the allegations are true." Is that an accurate summary of your sentiments today? And if it is, on the basis of what conceivable evidence would you prosecute the Wendrows for assaulting their daughter?
It is a true statement, absolutely. I would do that case again in a heartbeat. A couple things I need to clarify, and it's not a mystery as to obviously what your opinion is, Mr. Dickerson, because you've written several columns.
True.
Lambasting the prosecution itself, those that made the decision. First of all, that case was, what's the word I'm trying to think of? It was reviewed by the West Bloomfield Police Department. Based on their information, they presented that case to the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office to a warrants division. It was then reviewed by another prosecutor. Probable cause was believed to exist to issue a warrant. That warrant was issued. At least 4 prosecutors believed that there was enough information to go forward on the charges against mother and father, and then it was assigned to myself.
My question is simply, after your own expert witness debunked the only evidence in the case, why are you still convinced of their guilt, and how would you possibly go forward?
Well, I'd like to see the information that you're looking at that tells me exactly what you're claiming the expert stated, because my recollection of the testimony was not that she debunked it. As a matter of fact, she trained the parents in this type of communication and had been working with the child almost 6 years. And I was not just found, by the way, by the federal judge, and I do have the opinion, I can give you a copy of that. I was just not found to have received governmental immunity for prosecution. I was found to have acted in good faith and without malicious intent. So if you're not clear, if you don't have that information, I'd be happy to provide the opinion for you.
I've read the opinion.
It wasn't simply governmental immunity or prosecution immunity. It was I had acted in good faith without malicious intent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Judge Debbrecht, a judge in the district court down the road in Bloomfield Hills has gained some notoriety recently by sentencing every single first-time offender convicted of driving under the influence of alcohol to jail time. No other judge in the state appears to do this, but the judge in question has defended the practice by saying that she means to make a statement about the seriousness of that particular crime. Can you comment on that? Is it appropriate for a judge to use the sentencing process to make a statement to the public?
Well, I'm certainly not going to comment on Judge Small's opinion about the cases that I don't know the facts on. You know, each case is fact-driven, and I personally in my court take every case individually, especially when I sentence. So I really can't judge on that principle there. And I think then sort of the backside of that question is, I am going to look at every case individually. I am going to sentence based upon those specific factors that are specific to the defendant as they appear before me in the court. I personally work very, very hard on issues of substance abuse, not just in the courtroom, but outside of the courtroom as well. My prevention, my town hall strategies, my work with Mothers Against Drunk Driving and Families Against Narcotics. But specifically in the courtroom, what I'm looking at is there a possibility for rehabilitation here? Let's protect the community, the same community that I drive in with my children. I want to be protected. I want you to be protected in that community as well. We are blessed to have a sobriety court that was established by Judge McMillan. And in that, I don't just put people on probation. I bring them back for reviews before me, sometimes as often as once a week. I meet with their therapists. I meet with the probation officers. I hold them accountable directly to me, and in that we see some sense of rehabilitation. I think that's tougher personally than going to jail.
Thank you.
Next question will start with Judge Debbrecht, and will be from Ms. Safran.
Judge Debbrecht, it's social media. It's here to stay, and it's pretty much a way of life. And I'm assuming, in fact, I know for your campaign you have a Facebook page, I believe. I've seen it.
I do, yes.
And we see stories all the time, or we see more and more stories of parties in cases perhaps taking advantage of social media, whether it's friending defendants, or there was a case up in Macomb County within the last couple of years where the juror put out a post on Facebook that she couldn't wait to see the look on the defendant's face when they announced he was guilty and the jury was still deliberating. I'm just wondering, what sort of issues have you, if you've run into any on social media, and how would you address keeping social media under control in cases that are pending in front of you?
You mean with regard to their reaching out to my own Facebook page?
Just in terms of, in general, how would you address just the issue of jurors, witnesses, parties using social media during the course of a case?
Well, certainly, you know, I'm very, very thorough in giving instructions to the jury. Oftentimes in the district court, unlike some of the cases that would go 3 weeks long as a felony prosecutor, you know, they're in and they're out. You know, we ask them to turn their phones off. You know, we give them specific instruction. We remind them of that. With regard to other cases, I have made it on my Facebook page, my judicial page especially, where people aren't allowed to comment in. They can go in, they can look at it, they can like it, but I don't friend people. In fact, we're prohibited from doing those things as part of the judicial canons, and I take that very seriously. Quite honestly, I'm very protective of my personal Facebook page. My kids are on there. I've put people in prison, or I haven't, the judge has. I prosecuted people. And so there are specific controls with regard to Facebook. I'll confess, I'm not that savvy with Facebook, but I certainly don't respond to any attempts to reach out to me by a litigant, by a complaining witness in a case, or a victim in a case, or any other party or jurist to a matter.
Just a slight twist on the same question. Ms. Dean, do you have any Facebook accounts or Twitter accounts?
Unfortunately, yes. I am not a fan of social media, but in today's day and age, the only reason that I have one is because of this campaign. It's a good way to spread the word about events, about what you've been doing in the community. I do believe that you have to be very careful, obviously, in certain professions, teaching one of them, being a judge especially, but I would never place anything on a Facebook page about a case that I had heard, I had made a decision that was pending in my courtroom. I think that's very improper. So my Facebook page is simply, I connected with some high school friends, which I was surprised, and it's just basically just to inform individuals about my campaign and what I've been doing.
Thank you. Next question, we will start with Ms. Dean. It will be an audience question for both candidates. What is your personal experience in domestic violence. Have either of you served for any domestic violence help services?
I have not personally served for any domestic violence services. I have prosecuted numerous cases, however, as an Oakland County Assistant Prosecutor, individuals that were victims of domestic violence. So I've represented, I couldn't tell you the amount, but probably hundreds, close to, of individuals that were victims of domestic violence in this community and throughout the county.
Thank you. Judge Debrett.
We don't have enough time for me to tell you about the 20-some-odd years of experience, intimate experience that I have in the field of domestic violence and sexual assault. Beginning back when I was 19 or 20 years old, and I'm into my 40s now, I began working in the field of family violence and substance abuse issues. I will confess, look at my resume here a little bit, just so I don't miss anything. I mean, I have stood next to a woman. I have been a court advocate. I've been a victim advocate. I volunteered on an interim committee to help pass some legislation to ban weapons and have the enforcement of the Violence Against Women's Act. I walked from door to door, from one rep's chambers to another rep's chambers to another senator's chambers when I was in law school. I was a teaching assistant in this regard. I did an externship where I specialized in domestic violence. I prosecuted domestic violence cases and criminal sexual conduct cases, or rape cases as they're commonly referred to. I have stood next to women in the hospital when they were horribly beaten. I have stood next to women in the morgue when they were dead. I have worked on every angle possible. And I work very, very hard to make sure that women and children are safe. And it is a goal that I will continue to work on.
Thank you. Next question will start with Judge Debrect and will be from Mr. Dickerson.
Judge, when defendants who can't afford an attorney of their own appear before you, you have the power to appoint an attorney to represent them. How do you do that? Do you keep a list of a dozen, 20 attorneys that you appoint on a regular basis? Do you, is it a much longer list? How do you decide?
Well, I honestly don't know how long our list is. That's maintained by the chief judge of each court. And typically the chief judge in each court is going to handle who is on that court-appointed list, all right? We have a tremendous list of court-appointed attorneys. And it is with great confidence that I can easily say, if an individual has requested court-appointed counsel, that I can recommend that if they meet the indigent criterion for that, and most people do, quite honestly. If someone does not request an attorney, and it's a case of greater severity, the court has the authority under court rule to appoint standby counsel, and I do that more often than not. Just simply to protect that individual's rights. I mean, the legal process cannot move forward in a smooth fashion if an individual's rights aren't protected. And I see that as a function of the judiciary.
Just to be clear, standby counsel is whoever happens to be in the courtroom,
No,
essentially?
absolutely not. It's very similar to a court-appointed attorney coming in on a case, except that they don't necessarily speak and advocate on behalf of that individual, but they will sit by that individual, give advice to that individual. I'll tell you, Mr. Dickerson, what typically happens in the case is I'll look at the defendant after they've had maybe a conversation or two with standby counsel, and I'll say, would you like a court-appointed attorney? And they'll say yes. And then, we proceed as such.
Mrs. Dean, you are also involved in the prosecution of James Perry, a kindergarten teacher charged with molesting 2 of his students. You won a conviction in that case initially, but the presiding judge threw it out and ordered a new trial after ruling that your investigators had failed to interview witnesses with eyewitness testimony refuting the prosecution's case. In a second trial, the jury hung when a single juror refused to acquit. But an independent prosecutor appointed by the court decided there was little chance of securing a conviction in a third trial, and Mr. Perry is now free. Was Mr. Perry guilty too, or did you prosecute an innocent man?
That's not my decision to make, Mr. Dickerson. As you know, I do not judge the individual charge. It's the jury or the judge if it's a bench trial. First of all, you stated your investigator. I don't investigate cases. The prosecutor's office didn't investigate that case. It came from Oak Park. So it's
Correct.
not my
I
investigator.
should have said the police investigator you relied on, the
I don't-
state's investigator.
Okay, well, it's correct, from Oak Park, but not at the request or the behest of the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office. Secondly, you stated there was a single juror who refused to acquit. I don't know if you talked to all the jurors afterward. I did not. All I know is that they were unable to come to a verdict which resulted in a hung jury or a mistrial. And you also indicated that it went to an independent prosecutor. I don't know what the Livingston County Prosecutor's Office, reviewed or how they made that decision. But again, I had a job to do, and I was assigned because of my work ethic, because of how experienced I am, and how well I worked with children, and how hard I fought for children in a courtroom. Probably the most difficult cases that ever came out of the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office. I'm absolutely not ashamed of it. And I had a job to do. My job was to seek truth and justice, and I believe I did this with the countless hours that I spent researching cases, spending time with children, getting them acclimated to a courtroom. I've had children as young as 4 years old prepared to go to trial. So I understand you're picking out the 2 cases that you wrote heavily about, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, out there that I wish you would have taken the opportunity to talk to those victims that I successfully prosecuted their cases that went to the appellate courts and were upheld.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question, we'll start with Ms. Dean, and it will be from Ms. Saffron.
No, you're,
Okay. Ms. Dean, just turning to the civil side of things again.
Sure.
That's a little bit more of my background, I'll confess. Could you just tell me what skills you feel you have that would assist in the resolution of civil disputes?
Well, I did perform as a district court mediator throughout my private practice. So I have sat down with individuals in civil cases and tried to get them to come to a resolution, which has been successful, probably at least 90% of the time. So I am aware, at least as a mediator type standpoint, to be able to listen to both sides present the facts based on their arguments in the law, and I was able to help them resolve matters before they actually had to go to a trial. So I do have civil mediation experience.
Thank you. Judge Debbrecht.
Would you repeat the question?
Sure, I just, again, I don't feel that civil litigation is necessarily an oxymoron. And I was wondering if you could just discuss a little bit of what skills you feel you have that would help to resolve civil disputes that would come before you on the bench.
Communication, integrity, work ethic. You know, a lot of times if you give the litigators, as you know, the resources to work the situation out themselves, they often will do it. In fact, I think the statistic is roughly 95% of all civil cases ultimately resolve. In the event that they need some direction from the court, I bring them back into chambers. We have a discussion. Let's see where the parties are at. Let's see what we can stipulate to. Let's see where our differences are, how far apart we are on those differences. And let's give it the integrity and the attention that it needs to come to some sort of a positive resolution. And if we can't do that, let's go to trial. I was a trial attorney, I'm a judge, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to listen to both sides. Not only that, I studied extensively in my master's in family studies, mediation, and public policy. So I was trained as a mediator for a long time, which also helps me facilitate resolution on these cases. We also have the benefit of an excellent, I think it's through the Oakland County Bar Association, in fact, case evaluation program, mediation program, and I utilize services like that as well. So.
Thank you. Next question will be an audience question. We'll start with Judge Debbrecht. Illegal drug use is a chronic problem in our community, especially with our youth. What are you doing, or what would you do as a district judge to address this problem?
Approximately, well, I've worked exhaustingly in this area, quite honestly. I've worked in substance abuse my entire life with regard to, personal and professional experiences, and I've managed to refine those each of those entities very, very much. From the bench, I see sitting on the bench, there's not just an opportunity to sit on the bench and adjudicate cases, but it's an opportunity to make a difference within your community, and that's something that I don't take lightly. As we know, spice and K2 and synthetic drugs, things of that nature, have been a plague on our society for some time. Some people even suspect it's been around since 1988, but I'm not going to give you an education on that tonight. So I'm seeing this in my courtroom. I'm learning about it. I've been testing for spice and K2 in my courtroom for almost a year now. And as I'm doing this, and as people are acknowledging that they're using this horrific substance, these chemicals, the parents are sitting in the gallery. The mothers are actually approaching the bench and asking me, what do I do about this? So I'm holding town hall forums. I got out there. I've been on TV. I've been on the radio. I've been in our high schools twice each talking about this. I've dealt with prevention and substance abuse in our middle schools. I have plans to do Families Against Narcotics. I'm working with the Waterford Youth Assistance Program, the Waterford Coalition for Youth on substance abuse. I could go on and on and on. I'm writing articles. I'm getting judges together to also combat this issue. So I will work exhaustingly. Thank you.
Ms. Dean.
Yes, I think the most important thing, and, the spice and K2 has been around for a long time. Chief Jerry Narsh in Lake Orion has been trying to do as much as he could in the community probably almost 10 years ago, as well as some of the judges in the 48th District Court. So it's important in your role in serving the community, I think, first of all, to educate. You have to be very careful not to advocate, but it is important to educate. And I think with the young children, and I'm a mother of 4 and I have 3 young boys, you hope that they're not out there at least getting a recipe for danger by so much being blasted in the media. I think the most important thing is education, more and more education. I have gone to schools to hold court in schools with various courts throughout the county. I have done career fairs explaining what I do as a prosecutor at that point or as an attorney. So I think the biggest thing you need to do with children, be careful not to provide them with a recipe for danger, but to be able to educate them about the consequences of their actions, whether they're good or negative. So as much as you can get into the schools and invite those schools to come into the courthouse, I think the better for our children.
Thank you. Next question, we will start with Ms. Dean and will be from Mr. Dickerson.
Which case
Miss-
now?
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Dean, Don Shelton is a circuit judge in Washtenaw County, has been for more than 20 years. And he recently did something I think is kind of remarkable. In pursuit of a doctorate in judicial science, he wrote a thesis looking back at each and every one of the 5,000 plus people he'd sentenced over the course of his career. Sort of where are they now, what had happened to them. And he said that the headline of that experience was that he had concluded that there are very few evil people. He said he thought he'd describe maybe 4 or 5 of the 5,000 people he'd sentenced that way. The rest, he thought, were ordinary people who'd found themselves in difficult circumstances and made really bad choices. My question to you is this. You've prosecuted people for some of the most heinous crimes, sexual crimes against children. Why do you think people commit crimes?
If I knew, I would probably be a millionaire right now.
I mean, do you think they're evil? Do you think they're mentally ill?
I think from my experience as both a prosecutor, as well as now having the ability to do defense work, which I've always thought, I had left the office at one period of time and came back when Dave Gorsica was there. And I did defense work back then for 2 years. And I always felt that made me a more well-rounded, better prosecutor. Because there are situations when you see that people make mistakes. They still have families that care about them. They still need to hold down a job. I would not describe the people that I have observed as a prosecutor as well as a private practice attorney overall evil. Yes, I do think there are those individuals in our society, but I think a lot of times people come to court Perhaps you could describe them as maybe a victim of their upbringing, the issues that they've had to face in their life, the poor choices they've made. I mean, I do believe absolutely individuals need to be held accountable, first and foremost. But you do need to take into account their history, where they came from, perhaps if you can, what their childhood was like. I don't think people should use that as a crutch to excuse their behavior criminally, but I do think that you have to take that into account. None of us walk into a courtroom or in any setting as a blank sheet of paper. We all have a history behind us. And as much as a judge can determine what that history is, maybe they're going to be able to help them, excuse me, all the more.
Judge Debbrecht, same question. Based on your experience as a judge and a prosecutor, why do people commit crimes?
Life experiences. There's a macro system approach that people talk about in different fields, and there's systems that work on people. And let me just tell you about these systems. So here's the individual in the middle, and there are different things that happen and that affect them in their life, and that may lead them down different paths, making bad decisions, desperation. There's life circumstances, poverty, you lose a job, substance abuse. There is some depravity out there. I mean, Judge Sheldon has been a wonderful mentor for me, and I have great respect for the work that he's done. But there's also situations such as lack of resources, mental illness, the desperation that I talked about. Oftentimes, we will see women who have been victims of domestic violence or sexual assault committing retail fraud offenses. And so here we are, we're looking at punishment and deterrence, but we need to treat the entire system as well. And a good pre-sentence investigation and report can take a look. And I am very intensive in making sure, and we're blessed by great probation officers in our court, to get a very thorough assessment of their needs and their psychological situation, which often plays into it as well, so that we can have an appropriate remedy and really give them the resources that they need to heal and to become whole from all of it.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Judge Debbrecht, and it will be from Ms. Safran.
Judge Debbrecht, and again, also Ms. Dean, I'll hit you both with the same question. Looking at just the judicial system, and you've both had a lot of experience in the system, but anybody who's involved in the system can always think of ways to improve the system. So what do you think, what improvements, what changes would you advocate in the judicial system, and why?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and the one thing that I would change about the judicial system, we are nonpartisan for a reason. And I believe that we are the only state in our country where the political parties nominate our Supreme Court candidates and have an influence there. You don't want a judge whose thumb is already on the scale. This is not a partisan position. We need to have people come in and really recognize that. And so that's the first and most paramount thing that I would change about the judicial system. I would, if I could wave my magic wand, I would allow judges to have more resources. One of the things running a sobriety court and a domestic violence court, and we have a mental health initiative here in Waterford, is we often have a lack of resources. So, when we have an issue, sort of piggybacking on the last thing that you said, when someone comes before the court and they have needs, and we can't satisfy those needs because the resources don't exist out there, that would be something that I would change about the capability of judges to really have maximum efficacy in doing their job.
Christine?
I think that I've practiced in every single court in Oakland County District and Circuit, and every single circuit court judge, family law and probate judge, as well as many retired. And I think overall there's a lot of respect that I have for most judges. I think the one thing I would change is I don't believe that judges are necessarily there when they should be. I think there's too much delay in making decisions. I know that the Supreme Court has set down guidelines within the last 10 years of when certain things have to be decided, but I think there have to be almost stricter guidelines of decisions that need to be made and the constant delays that people see in court. I saw it quite often as an assistant prosecutor where cases were delayed time and time again. And I know there are constitutional and statutory guidelines that judges have to follow and that people have, recourse if they're not followed. But I think the one thing I would change is to make judges held more accountable, to be present when you're supposed to make decisions early as you can, without, of course, compromising the research that needs to be done. But my biggest complaint as an attorney of 18 years is that there's too much waiting in a courtroom. If there's one thing I would change, I think there has to be more timely behavior.
Thank you. This will be an audience question. This will be the last question prior to the closing remarks. We'll start with Ms. Dane. Not including your work in the law, what life activities give you the most personal satisfaction?
My family. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Campaigning is very hard, working full-time your whole life is very hard, raising children. As I stated, I have 4 children, my stepdaughter and 3 young boys, and the absolute most important thing, and the one thing that gives me the most pleasure, is my family. I really don't do much of anything other than work and tend to my kids, because I think that's what life's all about. So my family is the answer.
Thank you. Judge Debrett.
Mine is really twofold, and my children are wonderful. I mean, I think any mother who's going to sit up here is going to talk about her children. And no offense to Ms. Dean, I have the 2 greatest kids on the planet. And my 5-year-old and my 7-year-old, in piggybacking this here, work with me, because the other thing that I find very fulfilling is my service to the community. It is something that has been bred into me from the time I was very young and serving coffee at church. And I've always been very active. My children are now very active. They're involved with the things that I do in the community, and I think that that's something that's going to be instilled in them as well for the rest of their life. And we really enjoy and drive significant benefit from doing those things together. And so, for me, my little peanuts are the greatest, but we get to do it all together. And working for the Waterford citizens has been a wonderful experience for us, and will continue to be.
Thank you. That concludes the time for questions. The candidates will now be giving 1 minute to make a closing statement in reverse order of the opening statements, and we will begin with Judge Debrect.
Very good. I want to, again, extend my appreciation for this opportunity tonight. You know, I'm guided by something that my grandfather used to tell me, and that is that actions speak louder than words. So in choosing your judge this November, I'm going to let my actions speak loudly. I am working to make a difference, and not just here to talk about it. I am your judge who reads and signs search warrants in the middle of the night, keeping dangerous criminals off our street. I'm your judge who gives up her Sundays and her evenings to work with our high school students. I'm your judge who has worked to educate our kids and parents about the dangers of spice in K2. But many of you know this already. You've seen me. I know this, that from talking to over 10,000 residents at your doors, that you demand more from your judge than just signs and rhetoric. And I have more doors to go. I am Judge Jodi Debbrecht. I am your judge, and I am proud of my service on and off the bench, and I look forward to doing more. And with your vote on November 6th, we will do more. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dean.
Thank you very much. Again, I will state just briefly, I'm running for this position because I've been a practicing attorney, number one, 18 years. I have an incredible amount of experience in the courtroom, again, having practiced in front of every single court in this county. I've gone before the Michigan Court of Appeals, the Michigan Supreme Court. I fought against the early release of inmates from the Michigan Department of Corrections. I fought very hard for 14 years to keep this community in Oakland County safe. I will continue to do that if chosen to be your judge. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, I am committed to this community. This is not something that's handed to someone that's completely unappreciated. I chose to make Waterford my home because I knew this is the place where I wanted to raise my family, where I wanted to be committed. I've been involved with my church, with my children's school. I've been involved with my neighbors. I'm running because I know I will do a great job for this community, because I'm committed. I have a stake in the outcome. This is where my family's from. This is where they will be raised. So I'm hopefully, you will consider me on November 6th for your next district court judge.
Thank you. That concludes our forum. The sponsoring organizations would like to thank the audience, the candidates, the panel members, and Waterford Municipal Cable Channel 20 for making this forum possible. For further information on the candidates Check the websites of the sponsoring organizations, www.lwvoa.org, and click on the voter guide, or www.ocba.org. We'll be showing this form on their websites and have further candidate questions and answers. Remember to vote November 6th. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Thank you and good night.
Sitting next to you, not in front of you.